Welcome, welcome, folks. Good Thursday evening. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandajis. I wanted to jump on 13 News Now Plus, our streaming platform, and talk to you a little bit about our weekend winter weather threats and three things that I want you to know as we go forward. We've got a lot to discuss. I've got like 150 slides we're going to go through. Just kidding, just 100. But we're going to talk about all of the aspects that are coming our way, including a bit of some brutal cold that's arriving before the winter weather gets here early Saturday morning. So brutal cold Friday evening. Winds turn out of the north and they're blustery. And I tell you what, by the time we wake up Saturday morning, air temperatures themselves in the mid-teens, wind chills down into the single digits. In fact, some models take us down to 0 and even below 0. So this is preceding the wintry weather threat that arrives Saturday night, well after the sun goes down. And I do think that we start as all snow for the majority of us well after dark on Saturday. It will certainly be cold enough to support it in all levels of the atmosphere. And that'll be important, all levels, because that'll change throughout the duration of the event. We're eventually going to get a warm nose to build on it. We're going to explain what exactly that means and how that's going to change what we see here in terms of what we're experiencing at the ground, whether it be snow, sleet, freezing rain, or plain old cold rain. There's nothing worse, in my personal opinion, than a rain that's falling when it's 35 degrees. And I think some of us will be seeing that as we head through the weekend, particularly Sunday morning into Sunday afternoon. Now, we do transition everywhere, most of us actually, from the southeast to the northwest, from snow to sleet to freezing rain, and then eventually that rain. And we'll walk through that timeline here in just a couple minutes. Our storm system that will be impacting us isn't really even relevant yet, or obvious on satellite and radar. What we're looking at here is this area that's over North Texas. This is the beginning stages of our winter storm that's got energy diving in out of western Canada and then moisture surging up from the Gulf of Mexico. And they're going to combine forces and build east. What's going to be interesting here is this is going to be what we call a Miller Type B system. There's Miller Type A, Miller Type B. Miller Type A is better for snow for us. Miller Type B has to do with the transfer of the energy to a storm developing off the coast. And a lot of times the low hugs the coast and keeps our coastal communities just that much warmer. That keeps it mostly rain or even the wintry mix that we're expecting. And that's exactly what our forecast looks like. But out there, it's pretty quiet right now. But look at the alerts that are currently up. It's been a long time since we've had such a large area for one storm system to be impacting. Okay, we've got winter storm watches in the blue, winter storm warnings, which were the watches that were upgraded in the pink, out back to the west, up through Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, spreading east into the Kentucky area, the Ohio River Valley, Tennessee. And then you notice over there by Memphis, there's that maroon color. That's an ice storm warning, which I think may get put up a little bit closer to home along the I-95 corridor as we get a little bit closer to the event. Probably at some point tomorrow, we may see a ice storm warning get put up. Now, closer to home here, we are under a winter storm watch for the majority of our area. That includes the peninsulas, the eastern shore, south side, and interior parts of North Carolina. It does not include the coastal communities as you get over into Currituck, Pasquotank, Dare, not under the winter storm watch at this time. I do think, that as we go into tomorrow, they'll probably be put under a winter weather advisory, because I do think you see at least initially some wintry weather before you are the first to transition over to that cold rain overnight Saturday into early Sunday. So that's where we stand right now. And eventually, as we get a little closer, probably by tomorrow night, we will see that upgraded to a winter storm warning. Now, I talked about the preceding burst of very cold air. So there are advisories that are put out for cold weather systems. And we have one up for the entire area. Cold weather advisory goes into effect late Friday night into Saturday morning for our wind chill values. Check that out. It's been a while since we've seen these numbers. From 5 above to 5 below. We're going to have winds out of the north that'll be howling, some gusts up to 30 miles an hour or so. And also, it's interesting when we do get the north winds coming over the Chesapeake Bay. You've heard of lake effect snow. We actually have a phenomenon here that's much more rare that's called bay effect. And when we get a due north wind with a very cold Arctic air mass, and even though it's January, water temperatures in the Chesapeake Bay are still warm enough that we can get a modest form of a bay effect streamer that could bring some snow showers in. I wouldn't rule that completely out. Early Saturday morning with some of those wind gusts coming in out of the due north. But look at this snapshot here of Futurecast, 7 a.m. Saturday morning. These are wind chills. I can't remember the last time that we had below 0 wind chill forecasts. It's been a while. 6 below is the model output here from Melfa at 7 a.m., 1 degree in Newport News. 3 below at Wakefield, feeling like 0 out at Franklin. So air temperatures themselves will be down in the mid-teens. So if your pipes normally, get the threat of bursting, you may want to drip those faucets late Friday night into early Saturday, because even though the wind chills don't affect that, the actual air temperatures will be in the middle teens, so it will be cold enough to possibly see some pipe bursting out across parts, especially inland. As you get closer to Richmond, look at those wind chill values, and air temperatures there will be even colder. All right, let's walk through the timeline here of our winter storm threat. So Saturday during the day, I want to stress nothing happening. You're good. If you want to run some errands, if you want to run to the store, get some groceries to maybe make a big old pot of chili on Sunday, good day to do it on Saturday, although I'm sure it will be busy at those big box stores and, of course, the grocery stores. I don't think any snow develops here until well after sunset. Sunset is around 5:15 to 5:20 these days, so we're talking probably by 8 o'clock later in the evening that we see the snow breaking on out from southwest to northeast. So daylight hours, you're fine. Now, this will begin the opening of our window of opportunity to see snowfall accumulations. I think that's 8 p.m. through around 4 a.m. Sunday morning before we start to get that transition over. So several hours of accumulating snows are expected. Now, one caveat to that, I will tell you, based on model trends, now that we're in the range of our shorter range, higher res models, they are starting to be a little slower. So the later that the snow gets here, it shrinks our window of opportunity for accumulations, but it also allows more time for the warmer air to build on in ahead of it. So that may be something we're going to have to balance here over the next 48 hours. Again, there's still 2 solid days that things can still get altered in the forecast models as we get closer to our event time horizon here Saturday night. Saturday night overall, in the overnight time frame, looking at that transition, sleets first, then over to some freezing rain, and then plain old rain, starting southeast, lifting off to the north and west. And then during the daylight hours on Sunday, if the exception being up Williamsburg, points northwest of there, closer to Richmond, Wakefield, and interior sections off to the west, you'll probably be hanging on to the sleet and ice right up through probably early afternoon, maybe even later, depending on how earnest that cold air is and how much it holds on until it gets eroded. We'll hold on to the sleet and ice. Meanwhile, everybody else will just be over to a cold rain by that point. So any snow accumulations we do see, if you're not out there right when the sun comes on up and you can see the snow accumulations, it's going to look like just a slushy mess just after that. All right, let's walk through Futurecast. I want to start you off at 7 a.m. on Saturday, which is where we started with the wind chills. These are actual air temperatures. Check out these numbers. 10 in Accomack. Tappahannock, 9 degrees. This is a true Arctic air mass coming on in very quickly on a north flow. 13 in Gloucester, 13 degrees in Williamsburg, 19 in Norfolk to kick off the day on Saturday. Now, not going to do a whole lot of warming up. Check out as we forecast, go through the early afternoon here at lunchtime. We're still in the teens. 16 in Accomack, still 17 at Gloucester. We've warmed to 21 at Norfolk. We're still cloudy, so we're not getting the warming features of any sunshine out there. The clouds on the increase, lowering and thickening. And then right through the afternoon, here we are at sunset, we are still in the low to mid-20s. So high temperatures have a good possibility of not getting out of the 20s on Saturday. So ground frozen solid, whatever starts to fall will either freeze on contact or just be snow overall, with all the layers of the atmosphere being below freezing. Here's a look at 5:30 after the sun has gone down. Starting to see a few snow showers developing here west of I-95 along the I-85 corridor. These will likely be very light at the beginning because, again, an Arctic air mass is usually quite dry as well. So some of this will be lost to what we call virga. Basically, it's snowing. The radar is sensing it. You'll see it on radar. It's just not verifying at the ground. It's evaporating. The dry air is like a sponge just soaking up those snowflakes. Now, eventually, and according to modeling here, that we do moisten up the whole layer, and it eventually snows all the way at the ground. This happened last February, if you remember. We were watching radar. Radar was lit up with the shades of white and blue showing that it was snowing. Radar was picking it up, but it wasn't verifying at the ground for a couple hours, and then all of a sudden it started snowing heavily and we accumulated fast. This will probably be a similar scenario to that as we moisten up the entire column. All right, by Saturday evening, 8 o'clock, here's the snow starting to fill in a little more, especially west of I-95. Temperatures, notice, still good for snow. And not only at the surface, aloft likely still hanging on to sub-freezing temperatures all the way up to the cloud base, certifying that it would be snow to start. Going on through 10, 11 o'clock tonight, Saturday night, still looking at snow. And notice radar is filled in there, snowing in almost every location. here in Hampton Roads in northeastern North Carolina. Air temperatures haven't budged. Back into the upper teens now in Cape Charles, 23 at Suffolk, 28 even out at Virginia Beach. Even at this time at the surface, we've got a northeast wind. So typically that does start to nudge temperatures up, and it will start to do so here as we get past midnight. The pink shading showing up at the bottom there, that's a mix of ice and sleet, freezing rain and sleet. So the transition line from snow over to that wintry mess garbage that we'll be seeing here. By 1 a.m., there's the mix line building on into northeastern North Carolina. Now take note, air temperatures at the surface are still in the 20s. What is going on? Well, yeah, the cold air is denser, harder to erode, and hunkers down, clinging on to the surface. The cold temperatures there is likely very, very shallow cold air. Aloft, we've got warm air riding up and over the cold air. So that's changing the snow that's falling from the cloud into a raindrop, and then it's refreezing with enough time that it becomes a sleet pellet, or if the warm layer is thick enough, it actually erodes all of the cold air almost, except for the immediate, 50 meters at the surface. And then we see some freezing rain, which is rain, it's actual rain, but since the ground is still frozen, it freezes on contact to tree limbs, power lines, your car, your back deck, that type of thing when you see a freezing rain event there. So temperatures are still sub-freezing, according to Futurecast here at 1 a.m. Sunday, even where it's showing sleet and freezing rain falling. Now notice there's air temperature starting to nudge above freezing. Virginia Beach up to 34 by 4 a.m. Sunday, 34 Elizabeth City, 30 out at Hertford, still north and west. Look at Richmond in the teens still. So you're still dealing with snow there, which is why accumulations will be higher farther to the north and west you go. I've got a snowfall map I'll share with you in just a minute. Still 29 in Suffolk, still dealing with sleet and freezing rain there. And then notice the rain line builds in. Now, I wouldn't be so quick to say that that's going to be completely rain. Since temperatures were so cold for so long, some of that will likely be still falling as freezing rain, even though the air temperatures will start to warm above the freezing mark. It'll take an hour or two before we can get rid of that freezing component of the freezing rain before it's just a plain old cold rain. That likely by this point in time, by sunrise Sunday, has already occurred down in northeastern North Carolina. And at this time, look at Richmond. This is why it's going to be such a impactful sleet freezing rain event for them. We got the sleet line, freezing rain line building in there, but it's 20 degrees, according to modeling. So very, very cold air mass there still in place. Richmond doesn't get above the mid-20s by mid-morning at 9 a.m. on Sunday. Everywhere else here, most of Hampton Roads at that point has now lifted above the freezing mark, and we're dealing with a cold rain. And that will continue through a good chunk of the later afternoon, into the later morning, into the early afternoon, and even a lull in the activity is a possibility. There could be a dry slot that develops, and we see precipitation rates really drop into Sunday afternoon before the back edge starts to build on through. You can see there the spinning on the computer models here, right just to the east of Virginia Beach. You can see that counterclockwise spin there. That's indicative of the center of low pressure. Okay, so that is just offshore now at this point. As that begins to pull away off to the north and east, we'll start to pull down some colder air. And we may see a scenario play out that the back end, we see it change back over from rain, back over to a wintry mix briefly Sunday night into early Monday. So here is our early thinking on snowfall potential. Again, that window to pick up these accumulations is not huge, but it's not small. It's about a 8-hour time frame from Saturday 8 p.m. through 4 a.m. Sunday. As I mentioned when we started this stream, models have been trending a little later in the snow's arrival, so that would eat away at our accumulation window. Off to the south and east, North Carolina may be getting up to 2 inches initially with that snow burst before you quickly transition over to sleet and then eventually freezing rain quickly thereafter. Further north, south side, southern areas of the peninsula's eastern shore, 2 to 3 inches of snow is a good possibility here before we transition as well over to sleet, freezing rain, and eventually rain there too. Up along the peninsula, Surrey, Sussex, James City County, York County, Gloucester, northwestern portions of Matthews, 3 to 6 inches. So a more significant snow event for you, but even that will become a crunchy 3 to 6 inches that'll be highly compressed after we get a lot of sleet in there. Some models are putting out inches of sleet. Okay, that is just not fun. And that's going to be that crunchy couple of inches that you're going to walk on top of a fresh snowpack. Just doesn't make it very pretty outside. And then farther north and west up to Richmond, getting those totals likely over a half foot of snow before they too change over to sleet and some freezing rain. I don't think the rain changeover will get that far to the north and west. They'll likely stay all frozen precipitation during this event as it looks right now. All right, let's look at the different models and what they're outputting. So you saw our forecast. Here's a look at the graph. That was the Futurecast run that I just showed you. This is its solution in terms of what snowfall output it thinks by noon on Sunday. Very similar to our snowfall map, right? Around 3 inches roughly as you get through Southside, increasing pretty quickly as you head up towards Newport News, West Point, Richmond, over a ½ foot there. Even putting out a ½ foot over towards Melfa, and drastically lower amounts farther south and east. Even KDH putting out ½ inch of snow, unlikely there. About 2 inches in Elizabeth City and 2 inches in Hosky. Again, this is a model solution that comes out 4 times a day that will change. So we are now within range of our high-res model, so that's one of them. Another one is the NAM. So this is kind of the medium range NAM, the 12 kilometer. We also have a 3 kilometer NAM that's a little more high res, but this is the 12 kilometer here that has the entire event now in its horizon. This still goes up to noon on Sunday. Notice the totals are much lower here. It's thinking it's going to be a little warmer. The track itself will be a little farther north. Even Richmond's totals come in below a ½ foot of snow there, according to the NAM. Okay. Now let's check out what the Futurecast looks like in terms of the GFS and the European. Both global models, both larger scale models, so we don't get the intricacies of of the environmental conditions pretty much in a locality like we have here. But I'm going to show you anyway and show you what the model outputs are for snow totals. We'll start things off Saturday at lunchtime, and then you can see here the snow working on in well after sunset, still right along that time frame of 8 p.m. or so, give or take. By 11 p.m., we've got some light snow, maybe moderate snow breaking on out, and even the sleet line moving on into coastal areas already at that point. And then as we progress to Sunday morning, 6 a.m., we're sleeting, freezing, raining as well, south side, interior North Carolina, south side or northeastern North Carolina, seeing all rain at this point, and even that line pushes up towards the Richmond area. You can see sleet and freezing rain, the icing going on there, all along the I-95 corridor. Meanwhile, all rain here. So pretty similar to what I showed you on the graph. And then we get into Sunday afternoon, and then on the backside, you see that little bit there where we do have a little change, if there's enough lingering moisture. A lot of times when the wind turns around out of the north and west and draws in the colder air, it's bringing in drier air with it. So sometimes it just eats away at that back end of the moisture shield. So that's a possibility, but it's not definite. And then things are gone by Monday morning. I think it's gone a little quicker, probably gone by sunrise on Monday morning, but with temperatures probably falling by that point, we may see some areas having some icing situations again, some refreezing after the change over to rain. We may see temperatures back over below freezing and cause icy slick spots Monday morning. All right, here's the output from the GFS for snow totals. Kind of in line with the graph, right? Roughly 2-3 inches in Southside, higher totals as you go up along 64 towards Richmond. Over ½ foot there, 7.5 by West Point, and then down in northeastern North Carolina, roughly under an inch, maybe interior spots getting closer to 2 inches, according to the GFS. Now let's look at the European. Similar output here, snow breaking on out. Here we are, 7 o'clock. This is probably very light precipitation at this point, so losing some of that to virga and evaporation. Snow window here on the Euro, which this has been very consistent with the Euro being faster on the transition over to the wintry mix. So we have a smaller window than what we're anticipating, 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. Euro here is saying probably by 2 a.m. or so, we're transitioned over to sleet at that point, and our snow accumulations are cut off. Going on into Sunday morning, mid-morning, rain at this point. South side, according to the Euro. Southern portions of the peninsula, eastern shore, North Carolina, it's been raining there for hours at this point. Still ongoing heavy freezing rain and sleet up along I-95, Richmond. If your plans are taking you to Richmond this weekend, you got to get to your destination, probably stay there. It's going to be not good on the roadway. 64, 95, north or south of the city, 295 there, not looking good. And then that back end moisture there with the turnover back to a wintry mix is a possibility on the Euro output as well. All right, snow totals. This latest run is pretty similar to the GFS, pretty similar to the graph. So we've got a little bit of some model agreement here, both in the long range and shorter range higher res, showing 2 to 3 south side, up a ½ foot or so over towards the Richmond area, and an inch to maybe 2 if you're lucky down in northeastern North Carolina. So coming into better agreement here and much more in line with this here that I showed you. This is our forecast output right now. Our first call pretty much that shows roughly 2 to 3 in south side and up to 2 as you get over into northeastern North Carolina. So again, revisiting the Euro here real quick, and I want to show you the ice accumulation forecast. So the impacts from icing, all it really takes to start to get some moderate impacts is roughly like 0.2 of an inch of ice accretion. When you get to a 1/4 inch of ice accretion, you're adding about 20 to 30 pounds of extra weight on, say, a 1-inch diameter tree branch. It's not a small tree branch, not also too large, but even that can take down some power lines. And of course, you're getting that accretion and extra weight added to power lines. Going up from there, you're just adding more and more weight. So the European outlook here does look very disastrous, okay, along I-95. Major impacts forecast from the Euro. I want to preface this before I show you the actual numeric output of ice accretion, which is going to kind of blow you away. The Euro has a known bias for exaggerating freezing rain totals, icing totals, because what it does is it combines the accumulation of sleet and the freezing rain. That makes more sense when I show you these numbers. Okay? Notice the sharp cutoff here. Inland areas, so you're not looking at any freezing rain likely, Eastern Shore, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Elizabeth City, down through the Outer Banks. You have the maritime layer that's going to keep us, once we do pop above freezing, keeping us above freezing. So the cold air hunkering down and staying close to the coast, probably out of the cards. But back inland where the cold air is hunkered in, something called a cold air damming event. When we got the northeast winds, all the cold air banks up against the mountains, the higher elevation in the western parts of the state, and just kind of pools. And that's what we see here, presenting the possibility of a big ice storm. But these numbers along I-95 are pretty unbelievable. And I think they are. I don't think we're going to get ice accretion totals over 1 inch. That would bring down a lot of trees, a lot of power lines. Of course, Dominion's probably looking at this and saying, oh, you know, we got to pay attention to this for sure. They've got a whole meteorology team over there that's probably looking at this and thinking the same thing. Probably more within the realm of possibility, getting 1/2 inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch of ice accretion. Even that is going to cause some major problems. But look for comparison what the GFS is showing. Doesn't make much sense because it brings the icing potential all the way to Virginia Beach, all the way to the immediate coastline, which just doesn't make sense. You have the ocean influence there, and even though it's January, still the ocean's not frozen. It is still bringing in milder temperatures above freezing closer to the water. So you're not going to see the freezing rain there, I don't think, closer to the water in Virginia Beach, over to Elizabeth City. Back inland, yeah, those totals are probably a little bit more believable. 1/2 inch, 0.6 of an inch, maybe a 3/4 of an inch ice accretion there. It all depends on the duration and how long that cold air can hang on before it gets eroded. And a lot of times when we have very heavy precipitation, that in itself can start to erode the cold layer. So if it's lighter precipitation, light to moderate freezing rain drizzle, you'll see more of an ice accretion for a longer duration of time than you would if it was very heavy rain that initially falls into a sub-freezing surface. That'll probably overwhelm that and boost those temperatures up. So that would bring it to an end, almost self-limiting there with the higher precipitation rates. So you may be wondering, well, why do we get these different types of precipitation with the same storm? Things are always changing. With winter weather, it's very different and more dynamic because you have to forecast all layers of the atmosphere. With a normal storm in the springtime or the summer, you're not looking at all those different levels because it's going to be raining because air temperatures are nowhere close to freezing. You get all into this other level of intricacies with different freezing levels, warm tongues, warm noses, all sorts of things that can disrupt a snowfall forecast and lead to a high bust potential in terms of snowfall amounts. So what causes this? Well, it's going to be winds in all directions at different levels, okay? At the surface, we have the cold air damming event that will likely set up the cold pool that'll keep temperatures in the 20s, especially west and inland. What will happen is as the storm hits the coast and really starts to intensify, it'll bring in winds from the south and east in the mid-levels, and that'll bring in warmer air. That's our warm nose. The snow will be falling from the cloud base, which it always is snow. It's always going to start as snow. But it's going to hit that warm layer, and if the warm layer is very shallow, it'll partially melt the snowflake, and then it refreezes, you have sleet. If that warm layer is quite thick, you're going to completely melt that snowflake, and if that warm layer extends all the way to just above the surface, then you get the freezing on contact, you get freezing rain. So dependent on how thick and how present that warm layer is depends on what you see. If you have the entire column being below freezing, no worries, you have all snow. We had that this past February, which was quite rare, honestly, to have the entire area seeing snow. Last year was very weird in general. Do you remember we had, before that system in February, we had probably around now, last January, where the Outer Banks had one of their biggest snowstorms ever? I think KDH or Nags Head picked up like 1 foot of snow. It was unbelievable. And then a month later, we had our snowstorm here that we got about a foot of snow in Norfolk and over to Virginia Beach. Wild. What a time to be alive, huh? All right. Not happening this time around, though. But winter is still young. So talking about that warm nose, we can model that. Our models model all the different layers of the atmosphere. And I want to show you the European output for that layer. We're going to look at the 850 millibar temperatures 5,000 feet up. And there's a line that you're going to see that will pop up. It's a blue line. North of it is going to be temperatures that are below freezing, at or below freezing. And south of it is going to be the sleet that starts to build on it. And temperatures get above the freezing mark. So that's our warm nose. Here we are starting things off Saturday night. All levels, pretty much, are below freezing. So that's why we're looking at initially it'll be just plain old snow. Then as we progress through the evening, there's the blue line. There it is off to the south. It's now approaching the Albemarle. But it's midnight, so we're still snowing in a lot of areas, especially to the north and south side up to Richmond. Still snow at that point. Fast forward a little bit more, it moves all the way through northeastern North Carolina. And at this point in time, 5 a.m., European says, we're seeing temperatures at the 5,000 foot mark, edging close and above the freezing mark. So likely bringing in some sleet and freezing rain there. Up to the north, still in the 20s. Pretty good, again, but this is one level. That warm nose could be nudged in just below or just above this level that shows still freezing temperatures. So I don't want you to look at this and say, oh, it's definitely snowing here at 5 a.m. It probably is not, because there's probably a warm nose nudging in there. They're very hard to pinpoint which layer they're going to develop in. But as we go through the morning hours on Sunday, here we are up to early afternoon. It has cleared the area. The blue line has cleared us all the way off to the north, northwest of Richmond even though you see here temperatures 30 at Tappahannock, 29 at Richmond. It's still maybe just off a little bit. But everywhere else, look at this, well above freezing at the 850 millibar, 5,000 feet up. So we are, at this point, probably just raining, while surface temperatures have probably been eroded as well. May have some sleet in these areas here and freezing rain off to the north and west and inland. And then certainly out by Richmond, we're still looking at icing and sleet ongoing there. And then it continues to migrate its way to the north as we are just looking at these mid-level temperatures Sunday evening in the 50s. We're all rain at that point. All right, impacts. This is a pretty cool experimental model. It's called the Winter Storm Severity Index, WSSI. And it shows moderate impacts through south side up to the peninsulas. And notice that we get major impact potential based on this modeling up north of Richmond. But notice what it does highlight as well, right along I-95, for the threat there of being some significant icing, as that part of the state, south central Virginia, cold air likes to hang out there a little while longer than when it gets evacuated from the rest of the state. So that may lead to a pretty extensive icing situation there. All right, we'll end things with your 7-day forecast. I'll tell you what, we've got temperatures that are going to be very cold on Saturday, setting the stage for this initially very wintry system, before we do see that transition over to a wintry mix and rain. Now, those of you on Team Snow, I'm self-appointed chairman of Team Snow. There's one caveat that you can maybe put a little hope in if you're hoping for some snow, although don't put too much investment in this. We're 48 hours out still. This isn't happening tomorrow. Things could change. What are the odds of it diving farther south into a colder system? Pretty low, but it's not impossible. There's that. I'm an optimist. 41 on Sunday, and then we've got temperatures dropping all next week. As that system pulls away, it'll pull down another piece of energy, or another cold pool of air, and we're looking at 30s for highs. Now, the cold air will be in place all next week, and we're kind of in a pattern now. I don't know if you noticed. Last weekend, we had a storm. This weekend, we have a storm. And typically, when we get in that pattern, we look at 4 or 5 weekends in a row that are stormy. I'll tell you what, models today did indicate next weekend would maybe be potential for another storm. Still, models are going to be very confused and noisy until we can get this system out of the picture. So don't put too much into that. All right, folks, that's the latest. If you've got any questions, you could always find me on Facebook. Send me a message if you've got a question. I've had a lot of questions about travel plans. for this upcoming weekend. Flights leaving Norfolk, flying in, what should I do, that kind of thing. I can't make the decision for you, but I can give you some sort of insight if you're looking for it. You can find me over there on Facebook. But until then, we'll see you again back here tomorrow night at 8 p.m. And tomorrow morning, Craig will be on the weather desk for an extended version, talking more in depth. And by that point in time, we're going to have another 12 hours of bottle data to go through with you. And we'll let you know if there's any changes on that. Until then, have a great Thursday night.